Okay, we're here again today to look at tapering elbow. Okay, we did this one before. We did it as 3-piece, and now we're going to look at it as more than 3. Sometimes referred to as a multi-piece elbow or just a 4-piece, 5-piece. But the process really changes when we move beyond the 3 pieces. So last time, when we were here before, we cut this one, and it's part of the process that stays the same is that we use parallel line for the end gores. That's always the case for a tapering elbow. And since we used parallel lines, these shot up, the ends didn't change shape at all, and we merely joined in to create the center gore. Now when we change that to another piece in there, we don't know the width at this point, at this middle gore here. We don't know what the width is, so we can't merely just cut it across to the heel and throat of the end gores and just use what works there, especially in the situation of a squared around elbow. We need to know how that round taper changes throughout the fitting. So at each segment or miter line or gore, however you want to term it, it's going to slightly change in width. So we have a special process we're going to do for that. We're going to stand the whole thing up and get an idea what it looks like. So we'll start that one. We're going to start it the same way as we would if it was a 3-piece, and we're going to draw out our elevation view. We can use the standard elbow rule to find our miter lines, our angles, and draw that all up. We can draw the 2 end gores using knowing that they're going to be drawn in parallel line. Okay, so 6 to 4, and we're going to do this one here, a 4-piece elbow. Another difference between the 4-piece or multi-piece, 4, 5, 6, and the 3 pieces. The 3-piece was established off of a throat radius, so we had no transition at all in our throat. It was just a standard elbow throat. The multi-piece, we want to do it off of a center line. So in our case, we're going to use a center line radius of 7, which would be a 4-inch throat radius if we measure it across the baseline here, a 4-inch throat here, and then 3 to the center of the 6. Now that is going to change. It won't measure 3 here anymore or 4 here anymore because there is going to be transition within that throat. So the only thing that will stay true in this case is the center line. Okay, you can see here now I've got a good start on my elevation view. I've drawn in. I started with my center line radius. I drew my opening. I swung up my center line. Then I could draw out the opening here, square it up, and then drew my miter lines in to see where they are established. So next step I want to do is take and I want to square up my center line. So we know in a round elbow we draw it and we see it like a curved heel and throat and a curved center line and things like that, but we know in reality it's not, it's straight. So when we look at an elbow gore, the seam height is straight, a vertical line right here, it's not a curved line. So I want to represent a straight line at all of these points to get through the elbow. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to square up my end gores to start. And now I'm going to take my straight edge and I'm going to hold my straight edge to the point on the miter line here where my center line matches and a point of tangency along this arc. And that's going to get me the correct spacing up here. So I hold it and rotate it down until I get a perfect tangent point on this arc. It should be about center. And then I can draw my line in. Go up to this one, and now I can connect these two points here but I should still land on a point of tangency on that arc. So now we have a straight, like we're going to actually physically see, center line there. Now I'm going to need some room to the right here, so I'm going to take off our shop drawing, but I got my sizes I need, everything's drawn out, so I'll put those on there just so we can keep track of things. But now we're going to go and we're going to stand all these seam heights vertically, okay? And we'll see, that's what's going to establish our width. So right now we don't know the width of the fitting at this point here, at this middle point. Or if it was even more pieces, we would have multiple spots where we don't know that width. Okay, so let's get rid of this one. And let's start our vertical. So all done, I got my base here, 6 inches, and then just an arbitrary, just a vertical line up along that. And now I'm going to take my dividers, and I'm going to pick up each of my seam heights and tick those off. So I can pick up my first one here, the end gore. Okay. Take my second one for the middle gore. And now I have 2 of these, same one here. And I have another end gore. Now that I have my vertical, I can again draw my end gores out, and then I can connect and find my width at this location here. Okay, so let's do that. Let's keep going. We'll draw these end gores. Okay, and we get that. And let's just going with this with a middle line here, so we want a horizontal at that point because we're going to cross here. Okay, now I can again take my straight edge and join the top and bottom. So now I have a width here that I've found. That's all that this is done for us. Is any of the gores inside, the miter lines inside, excuse me. I can now transfer this distance here to my elevation view. And then I can connect from this point to a point along this miter line here. Okay? So that's all we've established here is the width at this one location. Now if you imagine a squared around, and we'll maybe get to a squared around, we'll see how time goes, but remember, we have all these element lines coming down, and then they radiate to this corner here. So we know this end would be square, this end is round. So now we have all these element lines going through, which gives us multiple widths along this spot that then have to be transferred into our elevation view. So we have all those 3 on each side, element lines going downwards. So a little more work in the square around. Okay, so let's take this one. We'll take this width here. Okay? And we're going to transfer that from here, from the miter line, go inside to the throat and outside to the heel. Straight edge again, and now I can connect to finish the heel and throat sections of my elbow. Okay, with a bit of cleanup there, now we see a almost completed elevation view. We have some profiles and things to put on it, but we want to do all that once we've gotten to this stage here. We don't want to have them in. We don't need them in this view here yet. Further round. So we can profile each end. We know that we talked about the end gores being parallel line. So we can make those just as we did in the 3-piece. It's when we get to this middle gore that's a little bit different now. The miter line between gores 2 and 3. That's the one where we don't have any profile or shape to go off of right at this point. We know from the 3-piece when the gore is attached to an end gore, we can use the same process. So remember, we went back and we used the outside profile and we used the step-offs from the miter line. That stays true here. So between 2 and 1, this joint here, we can still do that same process, just like the 3-piece was attached at this end. And the same goes for 3-4. For this miter line, we can use the end profile, and we can use step-offs from the miter line of the end gore pattern. But this one, we don't have anything to use yet. So that one we're going to add in, and if we go back to the Y branch that we did last year, we're going to add a special profile in. We call that a sector. A sector is a profile that's inside of a part. So it's a profile when it's on the outside. So when I do it here, it's called a profile. When I do it internally in a part, between 2 internal components, it's called a sector. So what I'm going to do there is just do my profile just as normal. And it doesn't matter if we go up or down. Okay, so now we have a sector in for our miter line of gore 2-3. From here, we've done it all. We've done all the techniques used to establish this fitting now. Again, for gores 1 and 2, we use the end profile for the difference in profile, and we use the step-offs from the miter line, or the miter line of the end gore pattern. For point 2, for the top miter line between 2 and 3, we're going to use these as our difference in profile, and these as our step-offs. For 3-4, we're going to do the same as we did for the 3-piece, and out here we're going to use the end profile for difference in profile, and we're going to use the step-offs from the pattern. So I'm going to keep going on this one. I'm going to get a profile done on each end. I'm going to scrub this out because we don't need it anymore, and I'm going to get my 2 end gore patterns established. Okay, I've got my 2 end gores established now. So let's just finish. I've got all my labeling and everything on there now. This is gore 1. down here. And this is gore 4 up top here. And we're going to work on one of the middle gores here. Now, there's a lot to be said, and it's true, that if we're asked how many sectors, and this is like a standard test question, and it's one of those ones that isn't always applicable. But if we had a question that said how many sectors are required to make this part, the answer would be 1. We can use the end profiles here, but we need to have a sector here. Okay, now just because that's the minimum doesn't mean that it's always worthwhile doing that. And me personally, I don't like to do it that way. I find it gets too congested in here. You imagine a 5 or 6 piece when you got multiple sectors inside here. The line work gets crazy. So I'll show you what I want to do, and what I'm going to do is we'll take gore 2 maybe, and I'm going to pull it right out of here. I'm going to recreate it over here and then put a profile or a sector on each end and do it exactly the same as I would a round on pitch. There would be absolutely no difference. Okay, so let's go through that process. So if I want to recreate a trapezoidal shape, I'm going to use triangulation to do that. And I'm going to start, we'll get a baseline to start with. Now let's just label this, we're doing this one here, I'm going to do it A, B, C, D. Now normally I would never use letters on something round, but because I'm taking a trapezoidal shape, I'm not worried about the round in it yet. I'll just use those letters to keep track of things. So let's take the distance of line AB. And this is a good technique if you're trying to recreate like a wall that's crooked or a panel of some sort that's not square 100%, it's trapezoidal. You can use this same technique to recreate a panel for something or multiple objects. So anyways, here we go, line AB, and I'm just going to transfer that here. And let's call that AB. That's our base. Then I'm going to pick up AD and swing it from A. Then I'm going to go cross. I'm going to go diagonal, and I'm going to go BD to get my second line or third to make my point there. I go BD, swing that one. Okay, that's now point D. Then I'll pick up BC, picking up this one here, swing it from B. And again, the diagonal AC will complete my trapezoid. There's point C. So let's fill that in. Let's grab our straight edge so that we have a nice representation of our trapezoid, or really our middle gore. So that's gore number 2. And while I still have my straight edge, I'm going to come along, because I don't know the distances here. I don't know what the distance or measurement is of AB. And you can measure it, that's fine. But you don't need to. We don't need to know them to reproduce this over here, to reproduce gore 2. But what I do want is a center point. Okay, so I'm going to take that and I'm going to mark right at center. It'll be slightly different, or it may or may not be actually, of what we expect it to be. you could also use geometric construction and bisect that line to get an exact center point of it. Okay, so now I'm going to come over, and before I do that, because I'm not going to use these, I'm going to scrub them off to give us some more room here. Okay, so we may want those later. Well, but I want to focus on this gore here. Okay, so let's put profiles on the end gore, or what would truly be sectors. Now this one, I don't know what the angle is here either, because that's potentially changed. So just set your drafting arm to it and run that perpendicular. We need that for our profile. Okay, so now I have, if we look at it, it's just a round on a pitch. Now, being that even the sizes are not consistent to what we would normally see if we were just dealing with a round or a round taper, they can be any size along AB or DC, but it doesn't matter. We can still profile it, we can still get profile heights, we can still get step-offs. And now we can go and virtually just do this exactly the same as we would a round on a pitch. Taking difference of profile, it's all the same. Okay? So let's go through, let's label this, and we're now just thinking of this as its own fitting. Okay, so let's get rid of the letters, because they'll just confuse us. And let's go 1, 2. Okay, now we have a round to develop using difference of profile, just like we did back in level 2. So we go through and create the pattern for that one. We would do the same for gore 3. We already established our end gores 1 and 4, and then we have our part. We have our completed pattern for the entire fitting. Okay, 4-piece elbow.